إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So we'll begin again with الدروس المهمة لعامة الأمة, the important lessons for the Ummah, these important lessons that Shaykh bin Baaz rahimahullah ta'ala has compiled. The first of those lessons we completed it, and that was the explanation of Surah Al-Fatiha and some of the main benefits that can be derived from Surah Al-Fatiha in understanding it and its meanings. So the first lesson that we completed was Surah Al-Fatiha, in understanding its meanings, some of the main benefits to be taken from it. And now the second lesson that Shaykh bin Baaz rahimahullah ta'ala he mentions in this book is the explanation and some of the benefits from Surah Al-Zalzala, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, from this particular surah. So this particular surah then, the subject matter within it of this surah is the signs, or some of the signs of the Day of Judgment, or just prior, or some of the major signs that will occur, or the serious signs that will occur on the Day of Judgment, and also regarding the accountability that will take place on that day in terms of rewarding those who did good and punishing those who did evil. So that is the subject matter of this particular surah of the Quran. In terms of the actual meanings of it, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, when the earth is shaken with a violent shaking. وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, and the earth brings forth its burdens. وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا, and man says, what has befallen it? يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا, on that day the earth shall tell its news. بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا, because your Lord has inspired it. يَوْمَئِذٍ يَصْدُرُ النَّاسُ أَشْتَاتًا لِيُرَوْا أَعْمَالَهُم, on that day men shall come forth in sundry bodies that they may be shown their works. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى, so he who has done an atom's weight of good shall see it. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى, and he who has done an atom's weight of evil shall see it. So that is Surah Al-Zalzala. The reason why it has been named as Surah Al-Zalzala is, or Al-Zilzal, is because it mentions the earthquakes, the shaking of the earth that will occur prior to the Day of Judgment, or just short of the Day of Judgment. And it is linked to that which came prior to it. It is linked to the surah that comes just before it. So if a person was to look in the Mus'haf, and you were to look at the previous surah and the ending of the previous surah, Surah Al-Bayyinah, then you would see at the end of it the threat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts forth to the kuffar, and also the promise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents for the believers. The punishment of the kuffar for the fire, in the fire, and the reward of the believers in terms of the paradise. And the time for all of that recompense, good for good and evil for evil, And the signs, or some of the signs of it, are that these shakings and these tremors of the earth will occur just prior to that day of judgment. And the earth, it will take out its burdens, and the explanation of that will come. And every individual will be given his due recompense on that day. The reason why this particular surah was revealed, as Shaykh bin Baaz rahimahullah, he says, كان الكفار يسألون كثيرا عن الساعة ويوم الحساب. That the kuffar, the disbelievers, they used to ask a lot about the day of judgment and the day of accountability. فأبان لهم في هذه السورة علامات القيامة. So in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made apparent to them the signs of that day. ليعلموا أن علم ذلك عند الله, so that they would know the knowledge of that affair is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولا سبيل إلى تعيين ذلك اليوم للعرض والجزاء والحساب. And there is no possibility for any individual to actually be able to identify when that day is going to occur, when that time will occur, when the punishment and the accountability and the reward will be given to every individual. The actual timing of it specifically is not known, but in this surah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to those kuffar by explaining and making apparent some of the signs that will occur prior to that day of judgment. Then after that, ma'ani al-kalimat, the meanings of the words in the surah. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, that when the earth, it tremors with that powerful tremor, أي تحرك أسفلها, يخبر الله تعالى عما هو يوم القيامة وأن الأرض تزلزل وترجف وترتج حتى يسقط ما عليها من بناء ومعلم. It's mentioned that the under parts of the earth, the inner parts of the earth will shake, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that on that day that the earth, it will shake and it will tremble, and tremors will occur to the extent that everything that is upon the earth will fall and crumble. All of the structures that are upon the face of the earth, then all of those structures will crumble and they will fall when the earth tremors and trembles and shakes prior to the day of judgment. So the mountains will come crashing down, and all of the other types of valleys, mountain pathways, all types of these surface objects, whatever they may be, they will all come crushing down and they will all fall when that tremor and trembling occurs. Then وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, and the earth will remove its burdens. That when it shakes on that day and it trembles and it tremors and everything upon it crumbles, then at the same time the earth will bring out and bring forth and release its burdens. Meaning, يعني ألقت ما فيها من الأموات والكنوز, that the earth will expel that which it has in of it in terms of the dead people that are buried within it, and also the treasures of the earth. The treasures of the earth and the dead people within it, all of them will be expelled and taken out of the earth. وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانِ, and so the person will say, the people will say, when they see this sight and they see this terrifying event that is occurring with the shaking of the earth and the crumbling of the mountains and the release of these affairs from within the earth, then a person will say, مَا لَهَا, what is occurring? What is the affair with regards to the earth? What has occurred to it? What has been presented to it? What has occurred to it for the earth to behave in this way and for the shaking to occur and everything to crumble? يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا, that on that day the earth, it will speak its affairs. It will speak and witness and testify to the affairs. أي تشهد على العاملين بما عملوا على ظهرها من خير وشر, that the earth, it will testify to the actions of the people, what they did upon it, from goodness and from evil. So the earth will testify to the actions of the people in terms of what they did upon it, in terms of good and evil. فإن الأرض من جملة الشهود الذين يشهدون على العباد بأعمالهم. Because the earth is one of those items that will testify, one of those from amongst the ones who will testify upon the slaves and their actions on that day. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال أبو هريرة رضي الله عنه narrates قرأ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هذه الآية, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم read this ayah, يومئذ تحدث أخبارها, that on that day it will reveal its news, its information. قال أتدرون ما أخبارها, do you know what its news is? What is this information that it will reveal? قالوا الله ورسوله أعلم. They said Allah and His Messenger know best. And that is whilst the Prophet ﷺ was alive. And after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, then it is Allahu A'lam alone, because the revelation has cut off and finished. فإن أخبارها أن تشهد على كل عبد أو أمة بما عمل على ظهرها. Then the news and the information that the earth will give on that day will be the news and the information of what every slave, male and female, acted and did upon it. تقول عمل كذا وكذا يوم كذا وكذا فهذه أخبارها. It will say that this individual did such and such on this day and such on this day. The earth will testify in that way upon the slaves, men and women. وقوله تعالى, and the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بأن ربك أوحى لها, that indeed your Lord, it inspired it and revealed to it. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال, Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما said regarding this, قال لها ربها قولي, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the earth, say, فقالت, so it said. وقال مجاهد رحمه الله, أي أمرها أن تخبر بما عمل عليها أو عمل عليها فلا تعصي أمره. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will command the earth on that day to speak and to say and to testify to that which has occurred upon it, what the slaves, men and women did in terms of their actions upon this earth. Allah will command the earth to speak and it will speak. يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا. On that day when the people, they will come out separated and disunited, all over the place and separated and no connection between them. من موقف القيامة. On that day, on the day of resurrection, on the day of judgment. أشتاتا أي فرقا متفرقين. That they will be in different groups and everywhere and disunited. Some of them will be happy and some of them will be sad. Some of them will be commanded to go into paradise and some of them will be from those who are commanded to the hellfire. So they will all be in separate groups and disunited in this way. لِيَرَوْا أَعْمَالَهُمْ. So that they may be shown their actions. On that day they will be resurrected in order that they can be shown their actions. أي ليريهم الله ما عملوا من السيئات والحسنات ويريهم جزاءهم موفورا. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can show them what they have done in terms of their evil and in terms of their good, and that He can show them the reward, the plentiful reward for the one, or the recompense upon what they did. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. So whoever does even an atom's weight of good, he will see it. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. And whoever does even an atom's weight of evil shall see it. مثقال ذرة وزن أصغر النمل. مثقال ذرة, the atom's weight, as we say. Then as the Shaykh explains, it is the weight of the smallest of the ant. Meaning that it is the smallest of the affair that you can consider. And that is why they translate it as an atom's weight. Atom being an absolute minuscule, minute, small affair. So even the smallest of things on that day, خيرا يره يعني في كتابه ويسره ذلك, that even if it is the smallest amount of good that that person did, the smallest amount of good that he did, then on that day he will see it. He will see it in his book, and that will please him. يكتب لكل بر وفاجر بكل سيئة سيئة واحدة وبكل حسنة عشر حسنات. For every individual, whether he is pious or whether he is evil in his behavior, then everything will be recorded for them. For their evil deeds, every evil deed that the individual does, one evil will be written for them. And for every good deed that they do, then 10 good deeds will be written for them. And that is from the mercy and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that for every good deed it is 10, and for every evil deed it is only the 1. فإذا كان يوم القيامة ضاعف الله حسنات المؤمنين. So if it is the case that on that day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will multiply the good deeds of the believers, وهذا شامل عام للخير والشر كله لأنه إذا رأى مثقال ذرة التي هي أصغر الأشياء وجوزي عليها فما فوق ذلك من باب أولى وأحرى. So if an individual, the Shaykh says, on that day will be rewarded and will see even the smallest and minuscule and minute and tiniest amount of good that he did, he will still be rewarded for it, no matter how small and tiny it might be. Then if that is the case, then surely those affairs that are bigger, then obviously he will be rewarded for those, and there is no doubt about that. Because if he's going to be rewarded for the smallest and tiniest of things, then anything over and above that, surely that will be on his records and he will be rewarded for it too. And that is, as it's mentioned in some narrations, that a person may speak a word, he might say something. وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِكَلِمَةٍ, that a person, he might say something, one word, one type of speech, لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا, he might not even think about it. He says something and he doesn't even think about it, but it's something good. He says something good. He doesn't even think about it. Just says something good. It's casual. It passes him by. Doesn't give it any consideration, but it's a good thing. It's a good deed what he said. Then on that day it is mentioned in the hadith perhaps that one good deed that he didn't even pay attention to, but it was a good deed, that speech. Then that will be recorded and he will be rewarded for it, and maybe that will be the one good deed that causes him to enter into paradise. And similarly in the same hadith it says, وَإِنَّ الْعَبْدَ لَيَتَكَلَّمُ بِكَلِمَةٍ مِنْ سَخَطِ اللَّهِ, that maybe a person speaks with something from the anger of Allah, from that which displeases Allah. And again, لَا يُلْقِي لَهَا بَالًا, he might not give any attention to it. An individual says something extremely small, a small word, a small sentence, a small speech, and he doesn't give any concentration to it, doesn't pay any attention to it. It passes him by without any consideration, but maybe because it was something that was evil, even though he gave no consideration to it, it will be recorded, and on that day, that one particular action may be the cause for him to enter into the hellfire. So every deed that an individual does, every statement, every action, then all of that will be recorded, no matter how minute it may be, and the individuals will be held accountable upon those actions and recompensed, or the recompense will be given upon those actions. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يَوْمَ تَجِدُ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ خَيْرٍ مُحْضَرًا, that on that day every soul shall find what it did from goodness present. Everything that it did from goodness will be there. All of it recorded, all of it in his deeds. وَمَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ سُوءٍ, and also all of those things that it did from evil. تَوَدُّ لَوْ أَنَّ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَهُ أَمَدًا بَعِيدًا, and the person will hope and will desire that there was some great distance between him and those evil deeds on that day, but rather they will be with him and they will be in his books. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated in Surah Al-Kahf, وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا, and they will find that which they did present. On that day it will be there and recorded in their books. This Shaykh bin Baaz rahimahullah says, هذا منه للترغيب في فعل الخير ولو قليلا. This type of ayah or these types of ayat, They are an encouragement for a person to do good, even if it is a small amount. Even if a person does something very small and minuscule, if it is in goodness, then this is an encouragement to do that goodness. وَالتَّرْهِيبْ مِنْ فِعْلِ الشَّرِّ وَلَوْ قَلِيلًا, and a warning for an individual to do anything from evil, even if it is a small amount. A threat and a warning and a disencouragement for an individual to fall into any evil, even if it is small, it is minute, because that will be recorded and it will be shown to that individual on that day, as the Prophet ﷺ said, اتقوا النار ولو بشق التمرة فمن لم يجد فبكلمة طيبة. That fear the fire, protect yourselves from the fire, even if it is by half a date. Meaning, even if you give half a date in charity, that's an act of goodness, and it will be recorded as an act of goodness. Protect yourselves from the fire, even with an action so small and so minute. And even if a person cannot find a date or half a date, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَبِكَلِمَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ, then at least with some good speech. Even if he can't find half a date to give in charity as a good deed, then at least with good speech. With good speech and good actions, then that is what an individual must do. Also, there is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha that the Prophet ﷺ used to say, كان صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول يا عائشة, that the Prophet ﷺ used to say, O Aisha, إياك ومحكرات الذنوب, that be warned from these small sins or these inconsiderable sins, insignificant sins as the people may perceive them to be. Be warned from these types of sins that you may consider as insignificant or small or non-considerable. Be warned from those types of small and minute sins that you give no attention to. فَإِنَّ لَهَا مِنَ اللَّهِ طَالِبًا, because indeed there will be, meaning that you will be sought after, even regarding those small and what you may think insignificant acts. You will be held to account and they will be sought from you. You will be sought after, even regarding the smallest and the most insignificant of acts as you may think them to be, but because they are sins, then they will be recorded. Then Allah, Shaykh bin Baaz rahimahullah mentions, حينما يريد الله انقضاء الدنيا وقيام الساعة يأمر الأرض فتتزلزل وتهتز اهتزازا عنيفا لم يكن مألوفا. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to end this world and to establish the day of judgment, He will command the earth to shake and to tremble, and it will shake and tremble in a manner which is severe, not known and not recognized and not known. وَتَخْرُجُ دَفَائِنُهَا وَأَثْقَالُهَا وَمَا عَلَيْهَا, and everything that is buried within the earth and all of the other treasures of the earth, they will all exit. وَعِنْدَئِذٍ يَقُولُ الْإِنسَانَ الَّذِي يَرَى هَذَا مَا لَهَا. So the people who will see that on that day, they will say, what is this? What is occurring? أي مَا الَّذِي حَصَلَ لِلْأَرْضِ, meaning what has happened to the earth? What has happened to the earth? فَإِنَّ هَذَا لَمْ يَأْلَفُ وَلَمْ يَعْرِفْ لَهُ سَبَبًا, because this is something that the people will not be accustomed to. When they see the earth shaking in this violent manner, and all of the mountains and the structures crumbling and the affairs from within it coming out, it's not something that they are used to or accustomed to. So they will say, what is this? And what is the reason for it? Because they will not know. فِي ذَلِكَ الْوَقْتِ, then at that time, تحدثك الأرض حديثها وتنطق بلسان الحال لا بلسان المقال كما قال ذلك العلامة الطبري في تفسيره. So then at that time, the earth will speak. The earth will speak, as we mentioned, testifying to what the slaves they did upon the earth in reality. وكل ما يحصل في الكون فهو من قبيل الأمر التكويني من الله إلا أن هناك أمورا تحصل بلا سبب ظاهري فتسند للأمر التكويني. And everything that occurs upon this earth, then it is by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and some of the affairs we may not see an apparent reasoning for them, but they are associated and linked to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this earth. So then the Shaykh says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مَا يُوَازِنُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ مِنْ خَيْرٍ ثِيبَ عَلَيْهِ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ مِنْ شَرٍ يُجَازَ عَلَيْهِ. That then whoever has done even an atom's weight